Romantic and captivating, Venice is one of the world's most beautiful historical cities. A dream vacation for millions of tourists every year.
It feels like you're in a time warp, like you've traveled back in time and are experiencing a life in the past. It's fascinating and simply beautiful. It's exceeded all my expectations.
People from all over the world come to Venice to experience the trip of a lifetime and to create lasting memories. As I enter the city, I too am overwhelmed by its unique ambience. I also fall under the spell of its more than 10,000-year history. But I quickly notice the hordes of people. Tourists are everywhere, all year round. And of course I notice the giant ships, which dwarf the city's monuments. Every day, up to 9 cruise ships sail into the heart of Venice. In addition, cheap souvenir trinkets are sold on every corner. What does all this do to the city and its inhabitants? Is it still possible to live a normal life here? Resistance is growing. People are taking to the streets. I hear them protesting.
You destroy our houses, our monuments! Go away and don't come back!
For this report, I've gone behind the scenes in Venice. I find decay, catastrophic housing conditions in the center, a city in decline, shuttered-up shops. All this has eroded the city's quality of life for its resident population.
A disaster because nobody wanna give apartments to Venetians.
Citizens are paying in terms of damages to their city and to their health, what caused by the big ships.
I wanna fight for this.
How could it come to this? In this legendary city, what's really going on? What's driving the city's wholesale exploitation? I've come to Venice to find answers. Who's profiting and who's paying the price? What actually is being sold? Access to this jewel of a city is over water. Most visitors are day trippers from nearby holiday resorts. I booked my accommodation online like most net-savvy people nowadays. But rather than staying in a hotel, I've opted for a private apartment. It's cheaper and touted as a more authentic way to experience the city because one comes into contact with local residents.
Ciao.
Ciao.
I'm Thomas.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Thomas. Nice to meet you. So this is the place?
Yes, please come.
It's €270 a night for 3 of us, half the price of 3 equivalent hotel rooms in the same location.
Everything is new and the house is completely restored inside and outside. The roof too.
Balcony.
Yes, a balcony.
Wow.
It's a little, but
It's like 5-star hotel.
I know.
No, you never live here.
No, I never live.
You just did you buy the whole house and to rent it?
No, it was of my parents.
And is the business, is it easy to rent places like this?
Yes, yes.
But you make your living with renting things, like with renting apartments. That's your job.
I try. This is the first year, and I want to try to make like everybody in Venice.
Yeah, is there a lot of people doing this?
Yes, a lot of people.
Yeah?
Yes, really.
People talk about like there's so many tourists and there's too many tourists. Do you think it's like too many tourists?
Yes, but not only for the house renting, but most of all are for the big hotels, because in Venice we have big hotels. Islands became hotels, and palace became hotel, and everything became hotel.
But you're becoming hotel too. It's like
Not hotel. It's an house.
For many Venetians fortunate enough to own property, private rentals are a lucrative source of additional income. Demand from tourists is high and business is booming. But how does that impact Venetians who are not homeowners and have to rent their apartments? To find out, I meet up with Matteo Secchi and his family. He works as a night porter. Like his daughter Carla, he was born in Venice. The family's lease is about to expire and they're facing eviction. They need to find a new apartment in their hometown.
is there offers?
No. A long time ago, yes. Now it's not very usual to sell houses or to rent houses by the newspapers. I have to come back to the Rialto beach and then another 7 minutes. A disaster because nobody wanna give apartments to Venetians. The owners of the apartment prefer to rent the apartments weekly, monthly, so they can earn much more.
The following day, Matteo takes me to have a look at his apartment, located in a typical residential area in the old town. He pays €900 for just 50 square meters.
Oh, very good. We have a contract we call 4 and plus 4. We have 4 years and then we wait another 4 years. So I am in my 7th year, so the next year I don't know if the owner wants me in the apartment again.
They can kick you out that easy?
If the contract is over, he can do it. He can tell me, I don't want you anymore because I want to rent the apartment to somebody else or to the tourist, and he can leave me. And so, this is my bedroom, and with the bathroom. My daughter is 8 years old, so she needs something. We need her room, of course. When she was young, no problem sleeping with the parents, but now she needs her space.
Yeah. But that's common thing? Like you have just one room for parents and kids?
So we don't have other chance.
To add to the strain, Matteo, like many in the tourism industry, risks losing his job at the end of the season. I want to know how things turn out for him, and we agree to meet up again. The tourists enjoying the sights of the lagoon city see no signs of the fight for living space taking place behind the scenes. Shuttered windows, I'm told, are usually an indication that the space is no longer lived in by a local. These are tourist apartments, only there are no tourists staying right now. But even a short-term vacancy is worthwhile because tourists pay much more than long-term tenants. Today, there are more privately operated tourist lodgings than hotels. That's good for tourists, but can a city function normally under such conditions? I meet with Giuseppe Tattara, a professor of economics in Venice. He has studied the flow of tourism revenue into the city and confirms that living in Venice is becoming increasingly difficult for its residents.
Oh yes, because they displace, of course, residents from accommodation. You mean, and it's very profitable to rent to tourists. The house purchases is by foreigners or Italians that buy houses in Venice as an investment good. So they just for renting to tourists. And this, they can get an income which is around, can reach 80% per year, which for a real estate is income which is out of any any measure, because if you buy a house in Berlin, you can have 2 or 3%.
He also tells me that much of the income on private accommodation is undeclared, revenue that's sorely needed in debt-ridden city coffers.
Well, you just ask people, do you need a formal invoice? They say many times, they say, no, we don't need it. So I can give you a bit of discount, and you just mention, I mean, a modest occupation, let's say 50% or 30%, but here in Venice is almost 90% occupation.
Is this the city's fault? Would I act the same way?
A free-ride thing is a bit, well, yeah, you know, people, you can't rely on ethics in these things. You have to rely on rules. So if you rely on ethics, you are lost.
Evidently, there's a lack of regulation for this market. I make a note to raise the issue during my appointment at the City Council in 2 days' time. As I stroll through the city, there's a highlight at every turn. Naturally, public transportation is via boats rather than buses. If only the vaporettos weren't so full. In Venice, it feels like there are often two sides of the same coin. The city's beauty and singular appeal have always come at a cost. We are on an island in a lagoon. Everything has to be transported by boat. There are no cars. Transportation, whether for people or goods, is complicated. Life has never been simple here. Silvia Gala is a Venetian who's had enough. She's fond of her apartment, but she can no longer bear the city's mounting problems.
So, ich wohne hier.
So, this is where I live. This is my living room. It's nice. There's a small terrace out there facing south, so you get sunshine all day long. This is my kitchen, but I'm moving now, so I have to pack everything up. This one's already empty. Most of the cupboards are empty. It's a shame, but I have to leave.
Why do you have to go?
I want to leave. Everything is more expensive here. Vegetables, meat, everything. Because it's more expensive to get goods delivered here. They have to be brought by car, by truck, and then by boat. And that drives the costs higher. And of course, it's the consumer who foots the bill.
Silvia wants to show me around her Venice, a city she once loved. Increasingly, foreigners are buying apartments here. Many elderly people still live in social housing, but that too is changing.
This is a huge hotel owned by the Carnival Corporation. They restored this side first, and then this side here. But the funny thing is, this side here was a post office. You can still see where the door was. And now it's all part of the hotel. And the people who live here, you've already seen today, there are a lot of old people who live around here. They have to walk a longer distance to pick up their pension.
From a post office?
Yes, it's paid by the postal service, and residents can't make ends meet, so they move away.
We continue our stroll around her quarter, Cannaregio. Like every other Venetian I meet, she tells me the infrastructure is crumbling. There's less municipal regulation, fewer doctors, fewer small shops, and instead more souvenir stores and private accommodation.
Who knows what was in there before? A grocery, maybe a bakery, a butcher's. And you know what I once saw here? The door was open, and I could see inside. There's a bed in there, and a table and a bathroom, and it's rented out to tourists. That means there are people who sleep in there. I find that very objectionable. It must be unpleasant for them. They don't know when they book a room or an apartment that they'll be sleeping here.
In the window display.
Yes.
Luxury apartment with a view.
Yes. Onto the bridge.
Sylvia has decided to move to the mainland. We'll check back to see how she fares. I researched the business model of private short-term rentals. Airbnb is the leading provider. This graph shows exponential growth. I want to know what impact that growth has on the local housing market. I find 7,000 private hosts, almost 3 times the number of hotels. Most of the hosts have more than one property. I find one that has 27 listings. Another even has 90. That's not private home sharing, it's an unlicensed commercial enterprise. I contact Airbnb's spokesperson to find out why commercial listings on the internet platform are not regulated like they are in Berlin.
Looking forward for whatever's happening.
It's not on platform to give this kind of advices. It's of course it's the institutions who set the rules. We are there to support them. Every city, every country needs a unique approach, and so we don't believe that one-size-fits-all solutions are there to be cut and paste from elsewhere. So there are regulations at regional, city, and national level.
But there's stronger regulations on other places.
I think different regulations.
What he's saying is City Council could intervene if it wanted to. Over at its offices on the Canale Grande, they're familiar with the problem. Paola is the city's head of tourism.
Airbnb provides accommodation for tourists, and that's dealt with differently under Italian law from private rentals. But at our last meeting with the ministry, we decided that we here in Venice must join forces with the other 4 major tourism centers, namely Florence, Rome, Milan, and Naples. We have to sit down with Airbnb and negotiate. Naturally, we can't ban these types of rentals, but we need to combat the phenomenon. For instance, by ensuring that renting to tourists isn't as lucrative as renting to locals or students.
She's unable to tell me how the city plans to achieve that. Meanwhile, night porter Matteo Secchi, his wife and 8-year-old daughter are still apartment hunting. He worries he may be out of a job by the end of the season. He can't afford to buy a property, but he still looks at what's on offer.
Tell me how I can buy a house at 420,000 euros. About me, a normal guy, it's impossible. For 200,000 euros, maybe with the help of the bank, but I find 50 squares, maybe. For a normal family, it's impossible to buy a house.
In 20 years, like when your daughter is grown up, do you think it's still possible for her to live here?
I don't know. I don't think so, because every year will be much worse.
But Matteo refuses to give up. We'll catch up with him again later. Silvia Gala is on her way to her new apartment. It's a 15-minute bus ride from historic Venice to Marghera on the mainland. What will you miss?
Friends, but I really don't want to live in this city anymore.
On average, 2 Venetians abandon their hometown every day. Here on the mainland, rents are just a quarter of prices in Venice, and the quality of life is better. There's more room, for example, for a spacious kitchen.
It looks ugly from down below, but this is nice. We have this huge terrace. It often smells of curry out here, but that's good too. And you have a view of Venice.
Matteo Secchi has yet to find a new apartment. A couple of years ago, he founded a citizens' action group that voices protest against commercialization and mass tourism called Venezia.com.
Allora, this is the inauguration of Veneceland. Veneceland was another ironic demonstration to show to the world Venice is not a city anymore, but it's a park like Disneyland. 1 year earlier than Veneceland, we made the funeral of Venice. So Venice is dead because there's no more Venetian, no more activities for inhabitants. It's only a park.
How will he fight that?
We started a campaign to show to the tourists respect Venice. This is our banner to stop the people in the street. Don't in the street because we film you and you go to YouTube. And so all the people can watch how much small your is.
Venice's city council has started a campaign similar to Matteo's. It's banned eating on public squares, bathing in the canals and feeding the pigeons, all offences that carry fines of up to €500. Matteo helps distribute the posters. But all over town, the rules are ignored. Some visitors notice the tourist nuisance.
You hear tourists bellowing in the narrow streets at night, so that you can't even sleep. If I were a Venetian, I don't know what I would do if I constantly had to put up with such inconsiderate behavior from tourists at night.
The new fashion of this summer is to make sex in the spots, in the famous spots in Venice. We had videos of couples making sex close to the Rialto bridge, and some taxi drivers made a movie. It's not very polite to make sex at the Rialto bridge.
We continue on to St. Mark's Square, where the number of visitors every day exceeds Venice's resident population. It's the city's largest and best-known attraction.
Caterina.
The locals all seem to know one another. Caterina Sopradassi is a qualified tour guide. She's annoyed about the devious behavior of other guides.
In this moment, you can see two groups. Just behind me, they are not really big, but they can also have 50 people, but they are not really free because at the end of the tour, they ask a tip. And the guides are not qualified guides like me. They have not a license, they have not permits, and they oblige to give a tip to her. So it's only by cash. So it's absolutely illegal. And they don't declare what they gain every day.
She also tells me there are free tour service providers who charge tour guides for procuring customers. The tour guide then has to get the money back from the customer. It's a widespread problem.
We are about 230 official guides in the city. For each one, you have to consider at least 7 illegal guides. Millions of euros per year. If we consider all the tours.
Millions of euros in damages for the official guides and for the city. Silvia Gala introduces me to another group of people trying to tackle the city's problems. As part of a citizens' action group, Chiara Buratti advises Venetians on how to find housing outside the legal market.
The people are not just the poor people. We also can say the middle class, as we can consider class nowadays, but we can say also middle class, people that pay rent for 700 or 800 euros, and they cannot pay anymore, so they are evicted from the of course, private owners of the houses.
Chiara Buratti's group helps Venetians to find unoccupied living space if they can no longer afford to rent.
So this is one of the abandoned houses that we have here in the neighborhood, in the Casette neighborhood. And this is abandoned since, I think, more than 10 years. Oh, you are taller than me, so you can open.
Is it illegal?
Oh, no. Okay, so you can see. You can see inside there is the situation in which is the houses that is completely abandoned, and also you don't have some part of the walls. So this house needs a lot of reconstruction, restoring, of course.
This apartment was once subsidized public housing. It belongs to the city and so ultimately to taxpayers.
And
how do you find these kind of places?
because the neighborhood, the neighbors say that the houses that are empty, they doesn't want the empty apartments in their block, because it's of course to have people that live inside the houses keeping all the block in good condition, of course, because if you have empty apartment like this, you have a lot of cold in the winter that come inside, water that ruins the walls.
And she tells me that the city is no longer interested in finding new tenants for such apartments.
The only thing they do when you abandon an house is to break all the stuff that make the house livable. So maybe, as you can see, the sink or the other supplies of the bathroom or of the kitchen, so you cannot have anymore the easy way to live inside.
Tourist demand for accommodation in Venice has led to skyrocketing rents. An average wage earner can no longer afford market prices. Single parents and young families are hardest hit.
They try all the way to, like, legal way, of course, because occupation is not a legal way, but they try all the legal way or the institutional way to have some support for the rent, something like this. The last choice for the people is to occupy, of course, because it's not an easy choice for a family to say, okay, I want to do this.
I want to fight for this because they say they don't have money to restructurate.
Restore, yes.
The house, but they have money to throw away, like Mose is other things. They do nothing for the city, really, and even for the people.
If the rental housing supply has dried up, why isn't the city offering help?
Dico molto semplicemente che abbiamo un comune
Venice is 800 million euros in debt. For a city that much in the red, it's extremely important not to spend even more money on subsidies.
dare sovvenzioni o quant'altro.
Austerity helps, just not the people in need. I want to gauge the extent of the problem and how much the city is to blame.
In the whole Venice, you have a lot of empty apartments that are public apartments, hundreds. So they prefer to close the abandoned houses. They just put some gate in front of the doors because it's cheaper than to give these houses to a family because they have to fix it.
Many locals do the repairs themselves out of their own pocket and move in as illegal squatters. Chiara Buratti takes me to Patricia's apartment. She is a masseuse who's lived here for 4 years. She did all the renovations.
How was this when you entered it?
Destroyed. Really destroyed. But I didn't finish because all the jobs I do is by myself, so there'll be every month I do something.
Yeah.
But aren't you afraid of that there's people gonna kick you out?
Afraid? No. They try every 6 months almost to come over and say, okay, you have to get off. I don't want to get off, so they give you 6 months more. It's funny, but...
Because we stay in a lot of people downstairs when they come.
Yeah, when they come.
And so we stop the eviction, and we have a table also with the municipality. In the last months, we met the chief of the Ater, we met the chief of the region, So for them it's not easy to kick off one of us.
So this is bedroom.
Yeah, the bedroom and the living room. So we have, in Venice, we have like 6 evictions per day in all Venice, not just the island, all Venice.
Meaning like 6 people are kicked out of their apartments every day?
Yes, but of course it's not with the police all the eviction. Someone, of course, choose to go away before, because it's also dignity problem, you know, for the families to go away with policemen or something else.
So basically we're talking about thousands of people that have that problem?
Yes, there is 1,000 people that have a housing problem here.
And as I discover, it's not the only serious threat to the people of Venice. A menace that no city resident can escape glides into the lagoon at dawn. The locals call them the monsters. Cruise ships, more than 500 hulking big ships call every year. They bring masses of people and, above all, problems. Tommaso Cacciari spearheads public opposition to the cruise liners.
When the boat passes and this water moves from the boat, it's like tsunami. You get a scientific definition of tsunami. It's a mass of water that moves, finds shallow, and the wave come up. So this big mass of water, ones that have been pushed against the walls of our city, is going back. And so this movement that sucks the water, sucks what keeps the stones of Venice together from inside. And if you want to take back to Germany a stone of Venice, you can, I don't know, probably this one.
A greater problem still, the toxic fumes spewed by the 300-metre-long behemoth. A team of international observers measures pollution levels. NABU is a German environmental group that monitors the negative impact of emissions in cruise and ferry terminals around the world. 2 of its experts are here today.
This is a value that would be typical in downtown Berlin. 5,000 or 5,500 is the reading you'd normally take in a city center with heavy traffic. But here we're in an open space with no ships around. That means there's a high concentration of pollutants from ship emissions.
And as soon as it docks, the engine responsible for propulsion is shut down. But the second engine is kept running all day long to supply power. Back there, where all the cruise ships are berthed, each one is tantamount to a small power station. And these power stations run unfiltered all day long, and the wind blows their emissions directly into the city. We know that particulate matter from ship emissions is linked to respiratory as well as cardiovascular disease. Exposure to fine particulate matter is also associated with dementia and even obesity.
There's a big health risk for people living in such heavily polluted areas.
To politicians, the stability of the city's foundations and public health are secondary concerns. What counts is business. The cruise industry generates 4,000 to 5,000 jobs.
Some people say, they bring lots of money to the city. This is a lie. If you take a balance sheet of a cruise company, you see that half of their profit is made by the ticket, and half of the profit is made by inside shopping. It's a system. It's like if you bring a big mall in a small town and you say, no, we will bring money to the local, to the small shops. No, you're killing the small shops because it's a system to keep all the money inside the ship.
The ships leave nothing behind for the city and its residents except pollution. It can be detected even here at the Rialto bridge in the heart of this car-free city. The experts measure increased sulfur dioxide levels emitted by ships moored in the port 1.5 kilometers away.
Of course, this is hazardous for the environment and the monuments that are so crucial to Venice. The emissions contain sulfur and nitrogen oxides which corrode limestone. The water causes more erosion and damage which needs to be repaired or the structures will collapse.
Across Venice, pollution levels are as high as in any major city during rush hour. Only here, no one can tell.
We know exactly how to fix the problem, and that is to switch from heavy fuel oil to cleaner fuels, and to install exhaust technology, particulate filters, and nitrogen catalysts. We've had Euro 6 emission standards for cars, trucks, and buses for years. It's the norm for land vehicles, but the same rules don't apply to sea vessels, and that's simply unacceptable.
We took measurements on ships that have filters. Pollution levels dropped by 99.99%. The reading in the exhaust was lower than in the ambient air. The technology works.
So why is it not used?
Because it costs money they don't want to spend. They'd rather kill people.
An accusation directed at Venice Port's private operator, where my request for an interview is declined. Tommaso Cacciari has been waiting years for answers, but over the course of time, he has acquired deep knowledge of the port's business model.
We are talking about 60, 70, 80, even 100,000 euros for every stop are going to a private company that it's called VTP, Venice Terminal Passeggeri, that is now owned by the same cruise companies and from a Turkish financial company that's called Global, based in Istanbul. This is a very Italian paradox, that a public company makes a private company that's owned by strangers, in this case, stranger companies, foreign companies, that are getting all the money.
Venetians regularly rally against the cruise ships. Activists say it's the only way to make their voices heard. Today, No Grande Navi, no large ships, is staging a protest headed by Tommaso. They're being joined by activists from more than 30 other groups, though the going can get rough.
Sometimes police beat us, sometimes again we have trials, but we don't care. We go on because we are on the right side and we are winning.
Chiara Buratti from the grassroots group of squatters is also here.
Because the issues of tourism affected the housing problem and also the environmental problem. And the money that the minister decided to spend to increase tourism and to increase the infrastructure is money that they don't put in the house, in the housing problem, the housing issue in Italy, through all Italy, not only Venice.
The city's residents want to drive home the message that Venice is their city. With their boats, they are staking their claim to the city's waterways. Silvia Gala has also come along.
I've moved to Marghera, and there's a project under consideration there to allow the biggest cruise ships to dock there. So I'll be fighting on both fronts. One in Venice and one in Marghera. My workload has doubled. I was hoping to simplify my life by moving, but it's not working out that way.
The demonstrators have 30 boats which they've positioned to block the cruise ship's path into the city. These types of protests have broad support among the locals.
We had a referendum. It was a self-managed, self-proclaimed referendum. It had no legal value. But 18,000 people chose to vote against the big ships and show their support for us. So I'd say the majority of towns do not want them.
The protest has been underway for more than 5 hours. Then I hear the demonstrators have scored an initial victory.
Today, the first big result of the day is that the big ships that's just more around the corner is refusing to leave by daylight like it's supposed to do, has decided to leave by night time. and so has communicated to their passengers that if they want, they are free to collect their luggage and leave the ship, and they'll get a refund on their very expensive tickets. So small people, a big impact already.
A small triumph that keeps demonstrators motivated to continue their protest into the night. They use their boats to block the canal and stalk the giant pleasure boats, even though the passengers themselves can't solve the Venetians' problems. At some point, desperation and helplessness turn to anger. Police boats appear and close off the port in an attempt to shield the ship's passengers from the sight of the demonstration. Later in the night, a cruise ship steams through after all. The protesters are loud and clear. Four kilometers away, Matteo Secchi is celebrating at his local bar. Today, he received word that he can stay on at his job through the winter season, but he still hasn't found a new apartment for his family.
You know, the life is so strange. You can find nothing for 3 months, and then in 2 days you find everything. So it's important. Don't give up, and ask to everybody.
The residents of Venice feel like a tight-knit family. Social life takes place in public. Matteo Secchi can't imagine abandoning his hometown.
You go to live in another part of the city with streets and cars. If you live Venice, you live the water, the walking, the boats, and you go in the mainland with the cars. It's like an Indian of United States go to live in Manhattan.
For 1600 years, Venetians have been defending their city against the water and from literally going under. Residents say they won't give up the fight now. The Italian government has banned cruise ships from the historic city centre from 2019. But diverting them to Marghera is a half-hearted solution, and one that does nothing to address overcrowding, pollution, or to protect the lagoon.